This is a follow-up to the last couple of videos I've been making about consciousness and the locatedness of consciousness, and specifically a form of consciousness which is distributed. I'm a bit wary about using this word consciousness actually, because it's one of those words which I think gets a kind of accrues meaning into itself and becomes very vague and difficult. But I can't think of a better one, so I'm going to carry on using it. But I don't mean anything particularly mystical about it. I just mean this sense of being kind of alive and awake that we have. And what I said in the first video is this sense of being alive and awake seems to be located in space. And what I suggested there was that comes about as a result of our ability to move around and the sensory engagements that we have with the world. And there I was citing a series of ideas coming out of motor cognition and motricity. And then in the last one I was talking about an alternative state of consciousness, perhaps associated with particularly lesions in the left hemisphere of the brain, for example, but also meditative techniques or pharmaceutical practices, let's put it that way. And that state of consciousness is associated not with being located at a particular point in space, perhaps behind your eyes or somewhere in your body, but being distributed across a kind of field or extending out beyond the parameters of your body. And I want to stress that at least for me, it's very, very tempting to think that the first one is real and the second one isn't, or the first one is somehow more logical than the second. And I don't think that's the case, really. The whole idea of having a self at all, the old hard problem of consciousness that David Chalmers talks about, I mean, that's just weird in and of itself. The fact that it's located inside the body and is kind of confined to or it appears to be confined to within a piece of space that's located inside of your skin, to me is no less weird than it exists at all, or be existing outside the boundaries of your skin. So it's its existence at all that's weird, not its location. That's what I would say, or it is a sizable problem in philosophy, at least. Okay, so the second thing is, what about the existence of this second form of consciousness that I spoke about, this sense of extending? I mean, is that a real phenomenon? I mean, certainly subjectively, I've had that experience on a number of occasions. Many years ago, I used to take quite a lot of acid at one time, and partly prompted by that, I guess. I became very familiar with that mental state, but also doing other kinds of things, meditation kind of techniques, those kind of stuff. I've experienced that, and I can more or less summon it up at will, at least in a fragmentary and partial form. And of course, it clearly exists within pathology. There's a famous video by Jill Bolte-Taylor that I referred to in a previous video, where she articulates very clearly what that sense is like. So it does appear to be a real phenomenon. At least I would suggest it is a real phenomenon, because I've subjective experience of it, and there appears to be lots and lots of anecdotal evidence for it, and also some accounts of how it might come about in some of the writings by Andrew Newberg, who's a neurologist. He writes about what he calls it the orientation area in the brain. I don't know how valid this is, but it's an account, which is that part of the brain, presumably the bit that went wrong in Jill Bolte-Taylor when she had her stroke. There's a part of the brain which just does our kind of spatial work for us, and as I say, locates, gives us this illusion not only of existing, but of existing in a particular point. So it seems to be a genuine phenomenon. Okay. One of the things I started thinking about after my previous video, really, on this topic, was not so much what the significance of this is, because I don't think it really has any significance. I certainly don't think it has any cosmological or spiritual significance. But what might its application be? Is it interesting and useful? Or is it just entertaining? You know what I mean? And I think there might be some uses for it, actually. I think there might be some uses, and for me, these come out of a kind of opposite consideration. is, rather than asking myself what are the uses for this alternative state of consciousness, this distributed state of consciousness, I begin by thinking, well, what is the usefulness of conventional consciousness? What use is it? What purpose does it serve to have this illusion or this holographic projection or whatever it is? What function does it serve to feel as if there is an I inside here or inside here? What function does that serve? And I think certainly when consciousness first emerged out of the processes of the evolution of the brain and the sensory motor system, I imagine that it served a very specific set of functions to do with preservation, to do with the identification of oneself as a particular kind of object that was subject to the threats and opportunities that the environment presented. You feel yourself to be, because feeling yourself to be at a point in space allows you to avoid threats and take advantage of opportunities. And I think there's probably a lot of threats and a lot of perhaps less opportunities when we first started having this functionality. I'm kind of imagining us in somewhere in the Pliocene, or perhaps a bit earlier than that, as these quite scared little monkeys. Well, not monkeys perhaps, but primates. It's quite scared primates with just kind of starting to develop this sense of self-awareness, and it's awareness of how dangerous things are, and it's an awareness of how painful things are, but it's also awareness of how pleasurable things are, and how great fruit tastes, and how great it is to snuggle up in a secure, warm place. So it's that kind of an awareness, at least I'm imagining, as being in the origins of this stuff. And that need for this consciousness to tightly bind itself to where the body is absolutely essential in those circumstances, because it's about preserving the body and avoiding threats and opportunities that present themselves to the body. So, and in those circumstances of being this the frightened primate in a world of threats, it makes a great deal of sense to have a form of consciousness which dramatizes and presents itself, creates a kind of awareness of that highly located self and highly fragile and febrile self. It makes a great deal of sense. I'm not sure it makes as much sense now. I mean, I can't remember the last time I was in a significant situation of threat. I haven't been attacked by a wild animal ever, I don't think. And it's been years since, some drunk outside of a pub has taken a swing at me. So I'm just never in those situations of threat. I mean, I know, maybe I'm just particularly lucky, I don't know. But those situations of threat don't present themselves. And the sorts of opportunities that present themselves are usually really easily satisfied. I certainly don't need a strong identification with this unique, highly fragile body. And I don't need as defensive an ego as maybe I once did. And I think probably the same goes for most of us. I mean, I've noticed that, I guess I've noticed that on YouTube actually, and other places as well. Because sometimes I'll watch a YouTube video, typically a response. Let's say Gary's on there calling me a rude name. He hasn't done it for ages, but that kind of thing. Or somebody says something that I just disagree with, or I find offensive in some way. I mean, I feel it in my body as if I'm being shouted at by someone who's standing 2 feet away. All my visceral responses that I'm feeling at this point are appropriate to being in a confrontation with someone who's violent and dangerous. And similarly, sometimes if there's images on here of something that's attractive, but my visceral responses are as if I am actually very close to something that is either nourishing or sexually available or something. And all those kind of things are kicking in, which is ridiculous because that's not the case. I'm looking at pixels on the screen here. So my reactions are all wrong, really. It's inappropriate that I should be so closely tied, that my consciousness is to be so closely tied to this body, and mapping the desires and the fears of this body quite so closely, it's probably more appropriate, given the technology and given the language that we have and given the complex societies that we live in and given the relatively easy life that many of us have, if my consciousness is not located in here solely, but is more distributed, that it embraces you as the watcher, and that it embraces this computer in front of me, and it spreads to the sides of the rooms, and doesn't keep reminding me or keep telling me that I'm a fragile, frightened monkey that can be hurt, but rather that I'm in a safe place, part of a kind of energy field which includes a lot of other people and objects and things, which are all equally safe or equally interestingly placed. So yeah, I suppose if I had to make a bid for a candidate for distributed consciousness as a valuable thing, as having some kind of application, it would be something like that.